So there's a new Netflix movie called Come Sunday, and I actually think it's quite a good movie. Now, it's true story. There's a preacher, huge following, very, very influential preacher, and one day he started preaching and started telling people, I don't believe in hell anymore. I don't believe in a God, an all-loving God who would condemn people to eternally suffer, and I think that everybody, whether they believe in Jesus and his message or not, and whether they sin or not, I believe everybody is going to go to heaven. And caused a huge, huge controversy, and this movie just explores that. And I won't spoil what happens to the preacher and how things work out for him, but I think it's a really interesting idea at the core that it explores for people who are Christian and also people who aren't Christian. You can make it secular and say, is it possible as an authority figure, someone who has power over someone, is it possible to punish someone and really severely punish someone and still love them? And or is it possible to have unconditional love towards someone and never punish them and always love them equally no matter how bad they screw up? Is it possible to do that and still be an effective authority figure and still be a good person? Chiwetel Ejiofor, he plays this preacher. I think he's fantastic, both when he's preaching and just very dynamic and charismatic, but then also in the moments of more soul-searching and reflection. I think he nails both sides of this individual very well. Jason Segel, he's playing a non-comedic role. I think he does great. He's playing the friend of this preacher that's very torn and conflicted between his friendship and his beliefs, and I think he does a great job. Martin Sheen is in this. He's fantastic. He's playing Oral Roberts, who's very, very famous figure in Christianity. He's dead now, but I think Martin Sheen does a great job. Donald Glover shows up very briefly for a little bit, but he's great. So really great cast that they assembled. And not forget Lakeith Stanfield. Fantastic performance. People say he looks like Dave Chappelle. He really looks like Dave Chappelle a lot in this movie in particular, but I thought he gives great performance aside from Chiwetel, probably the best performance in the show, I'd say. So let's look at the central religious question in play. Now, within most denominations of Christianity, they would agree that Jesus died for everybody's sins, but in order to receive that gift, you have to choose it. So if you choose not to accept the gift, that's fine, but then you won't receive the gift. Now, that begs the question, and it's brought up in this movie, what about people who never hear about Jesus Christ? What about people who never hear Christianity? And the classic example is, what about the starving kids in Africa, who they die when they're 5 years old, and they never really have a chance to accept Jesus into their heart? Now, I think the best answer I've heard for that is God puts within every heart this kind of drive to seek the truth and to seek the light. So even for these people all over the world, they're all born with this drive, and if they truly follow this drive, that they will find Jesus. So that's one kind of controversial question. And then another is, even the people that do choose to not follow Jesus and to reject the gift, does that entail them an eternity of suffering? Is that a fair punishment? Now, you could say that that's horrible to reject the gift of eternal life. If someone's giving you that gift, for you to reject it and walk away from it, you could say that that's horrible, deserving of punishment, but is it deserving of an eternity of suffering? And even, is anything deserving of an eternity of suffering? Even someone who's maybe not a mass murderer, but someone who kills someone, who's just a murderer, they made a mistake, is that worthy of an eternity of suffering? And I will clarify, most Christians don't believe that it's your good works. It's not that good people are in heaven, bad people are in hell. It's about accepting Jesus into your heart. So even if you do bad things, you can still definitely go to heaven, at least according to most Christians. And I will say, one response to this argument that an eternity of torture, that's too much punishment for even the most heinous of crimes, I'll say to that, a lot of Christians do say that their interpretation of hell is in a demon torturing you with whatever torture instruments you want to say. No, they say hell is just separation from God's love. So that is a clarification that's important. Now, why is his message that there's no such thing as hell and everyone goes to heaven, why does that promote such a fierce backlash from a lot of Christians? Because it seems counterintuitive that someone could love the world so much he couldn't bear the thought of anyone going to hell, and just someone who starts preaching this message of universal love and inclusion receives so much hate and so much backlash. Well, if you think that hell exists and heaven exists and you have to do certain things to get into heaven, and then you have someone who's a preacher, a person of authority, telling people that you don't have to do these things to get into heaven, and everyone goes to heaven, you could think that not only are they screwing up their own salvation, but they're potentially leading others astray. And that can be because it's eternity, right? There's no going back for that. So that's why I can promote such fierce reactions, like I say, in such a counterintuitive way. How can you hate someone who just loves everybody? And then some other interesting issues. Carlton, he mentions, he says that God is speaking through him, and that God spoke to him and said that there's no hell, everyone goes to heaven. His critics say that it's Satan speaking through him, but someone else raises the question that because of what happened to his uncle, and I won't spoil it, but something happened to his uncle, and does he have some kind of personal reason for just not being able to face the existence of hell, given his own personal life? And really, when he thinks it's God speaking to him, that's just his own deep wants that the world be the way that he wants it to be. Then there's the issue of, we see the rise in America of these megachurches and these prosperity preachers and televangelism and just this huge business, and Christianity, as Christianity has always been associated with politics and social control, but we see a somewhat new phenomenon of Christianity being very profitable. And you wonder how much of the existence of hell, and that as a symbol and as a teaching, how much of that is crucial to maybe not spirituality, maybe not following, the teachings of Jesus, but how much of that is crucial to religion as an institution and as a profitable institution. So you wonder how much of the backlash was due to monetary concerns, and you definitely see I think the movie, at least that jumped out at me a little bit. And then you have the really interesting issue that if you're a Christian and you start preaching a message, and your life goes either up and people start following and listening to you, or your life really takes a turn for the worse and people hate your message and really persecute you, does either of those things, should you interpret either of those things as a sign that your message is either correct or wrong? Because you could view it as, if you start preaching something and you achieve great success, you could say, well, look, that's proof that I'm preaching the truth and that I'm preaching a message that God would want me to preach. Or you can look at it the other way, and you could say that there's lots of examples in the Bible of people who speak the truth being persecuted, and passages that say people hate the truth. So in some reverse way, you could say that sometimes when you speak a message and you are persecuted, maybe that just proves that your message is important. So I think there's arguments for both sides. And I will say, I love the fashion that this movie had. When you see everyone's in church on Sunday in their best get up, and you see the big hats and the fashion, I thought that was really fun to see. And the religion that he's a part of, initially he moved to Unitarianism, I think, but Pentecostal was what he was initially. And that's, you see it in the scene in Borat, where Borat's there at the big, and the exorcisms are taking place, and very memorable scene. And Pentecostal, you think of that, and that's the fiery speeches definitely is a big part of that. Biblical literalism, like literally what happened in the Bible, not a lot of interpretation and metaphors, no, a kind of literalism. Snake handling is a huge part of that, and exorcism, speaking in tongues, casting out demons. So he was not just in any denomination of Christianity when he started saying these radical things. He was in a very I'm not sure what you want to call it, very devout, I'll say. The people who are Pentecostal, very, very, very strongly held beliefs. So that's part of probably what led to such an intense backlash. He probably would have received a backlash if he was in any denomination of Christianity, but I think the denomination he was in particular was part of the contributing factor that just such a backlash to his heretical views. I should say, I don't know if they're heretical, I'm not an expert in it, but there was a trial with a lot of Pentecostal leaders, and they found him to be guilty of heresy. So really tragic story, honestly. I think whatever your views are, when you watch his performance, Chiwetel Ejiofor playing Carlton, you can't help but feel just sad. It's just certainly a tragic story, and I'm really glad that they made a movie about it. I think it's great.